On Memorial Day weekend in 1986, 21-year-old Angela Crowley was making her first trip to Florida. She was young, vibrant, and full of promise, a popular student at her college in Illinois, with dreams of building a life filled with art, adventure, and love. But her journey ended in tragedy on the banks of the Cross-Florida Barge Canal, where her body was discovered, beaten, raped, and strangled. The investigation that followed would lead authorities to William Frederick Happ, a drifter with a violent past. Witness testimony and physical evidence pointed straight to him. Yet for decades, Happ denied any involvement, forcing Angela's family to live not only with the pain of her loss, but also with the torment of unanswered questions. In 1989, a Florida jury convicted Happ of first-degree murder, sexual battery, and kidnapping. He was sentenced to death. But justice in this case would move slowly. For nearly 27 years, Happ sat on death row, exhausting every appeal while Angela's loved ones waited year after year for the final chapter to come. Then, on October 15, 2013, inside Florida State Prison, the waiting ended. As witnesses gathered behind the glass, Happ was strapped to the gurney. For the first time since his arrest, he spoke the words Angela's family had longed to hear, a confession. With the lethal drugs moments away, he admitted to the crime, saying it was his agonizing shame that forced him to finally tell the truth. This is the story of William Frederick Happ, the killer who denied, delayed, and deceived for nearly 3 decades only to confess in the final minutes of his life. Classification: murderer. Characteristics: rape, kidnapping. Number of victims: 1 date of murder, May 24, 1988. Date of birth: January 19, 1962. Victim profile: Angela Crowley, 21. Method of murder: strangulation. Location: Citrus County, Florida, USA. Status: sentenced to death on July 31, 1989. Executed by lethal injection in Florida on October 15, 2013. Murderer who raped and killed a woman in 1986 finally confesses moments before being executed. William Happ, who killed and raped Angie Crowley, 21, in 1986, was pronounced dead at 6:16 p.m. on Tuesday at Florida State Prison in Stark. Moments before his death, Happ told his victim's family, "It is to my agonizing shame that I must confess to this terrible crime." Angie's brother replied, "You need to ask somebody a lot more important than me for forgiveness." By Lizzie Perry, dailymail.co.uk, October 18, 2013. A Florida man convicted of raping and murdering a 21-year-old woman in 1986 made a shock confession moments before he was executed by lethal injection of a controversial, never-before-used drug. Facing 17 members of his victim's family, William Happ, 51, the first death row inmate to be injected with the drug midazolam hydrochloride, told those gathered to watch his death. For 27 years, the horrible murder of Angela Crowley has been clouded by circumstantial evidence and uncertainty. For the sake of her family, loved ones, and all concerned, it is to my agonizing shame that I must confess to this terrible crime. Chris Cowley, the victim's brother, said the confession had come as a shock to his family. "You need to ask somebody a lot more important than me for forgiveness," he told Happ. Minutes later, Happ blinked repeatedly and shook his head back and forth as he was executed. The drug was used despite concerns it might not work as promised and could inflict cruel and unusual punishment on the death row inmate. The execution began at 6:02 p.m. at Florida State Prison in Stark. Happ's eyes opened and he blinked several times. He closed them and opened them again 2 minutes later. He then yawned and his jaw dropped open. At 6:08 p.m., the official overseeing the execution tugged at Happ's eyelids and grasped his shoulder to check for a response. There was none. Happ appeared to remain conscious for a greater length of time and made more body movements after losing consciousness than people executed by the old formula, which usually kills the prisoner within 7 minutes. Midazolam, typically used by doctors for sedation, was the first of 3 drugs pumped into Happ as part of a lethal injection cocktail designed to induce unconsciousness, paralysis, and death by cardiac arrest. The first of the drugs administered as part of the lethal injection protocol in Florida has long been the barbiturate pentobarbital. But Florida and other death penalty states that use a trio of drugs as part of their injection procedures have been running out of pentobarbital since its manufacturer clamped a ban on its use in future executions. This is somewhat of an experiment on a living human being, Richard Dieter, executive director of the Death Penalty Information Center in Washington, said Monday. The 3-drug process depends on the first drug rendering the inmate unconscious, and if he is only partially unconscious, the inmate could be experiencing extreme pain, he added. Because the second drug paralyzes him, he would be unable to cry out or show that he's in pain. The 51-year-old Happ, who had abandoned his appeals and said he was ready to die, was condemned for the 1986 abduction, rape, and murder of Angie Crowley, whose body was found on a canal bank near Crystal River in Central Florida. Happ was calm when he met with two spiritual advisors, including a Roman Catholic priest who administered last rites, according to Department of Corrections spokeswoman Jessica Carey. For his last meal, Happ had a 12-ounce box of assorted chocolates and 1.5 quarts of German chocolate ice cream. "To my agonizing shame, I must confess to the crime," he said in a slow, deliberate voice before the injection was given. "I wish to offer my most sincere, heartfelt apology. I have prayed for the good Lord to forgive me for my sins, but I understand why those here cannot." Crowley's mother and two siblings died before they could see the sentence carried out, but Crowley's surviving sisters and brothers traveled to Stark to watch as Happ was executed. Happ's lawyer, Eric Pinkard of St. Petersburg, said there were no late motions to stay the execution. Happ told a circuit judge in Inverness, Florida last month that he did not want to continue the court appeals that have kept him on Florida's death row for nearly a quarter century. Another condemned Florida prisoner, Etheria Jackson, has a hearing set for November 6th in Jacksonville's federal court challenging the use of midazolam. Jackson's appeal contends that there is substantial risk of midazolam not working completely, violating the Eighth Amendment's prohibition of cruel and unusual punishment by subjecting the condemned to a painful paralysis and fatal heart seizure over several minutes. Angie Crowley was making her first long trip through Florida on Memorial Day weekend in 1986, but she never arrived at her destination. She prearranged with her friend to meet at a convenience store in Crystal River so she could be guided the last few miles of the trip. Crowley found the store, but before she could get to the payphone, William Happ smashed her car window, kidnapped her. He beat her, raped her, and strangled her with her pants before throwing her body into a canal. Crowley's brother Chris has pushed for years through an online petition and an email campaign to ensure Happ was executed for what he did to his sister. "He killed my sister, he took her life. But when he took that life, he created so many other victims," Crowley said. "What he did affected everybody. It ate my mother up. I changed jobs and moved all within 3 months." The murder shook Oregon, a small town about 40 miles southwest of Rockford, Illinois. Angie Crowley was a popular student at Oregon High School. After graduating, she attended Northern Illinois University before moving to Fort Lauderdale in December 1985. She worked as a travel agent to help pursue her dreams to travel the world. He took away the potential. There were 7 kids in that family, and she had the greatest potential of everybody. She had the personality, she had the looks, she had the smarts, and she had the attitude. She really, really accomplished things, and he took that, Crowley said. "We were never able to see it." And the praise is not just because he's a loving brother. Angie Crowley's friends said she had a magnetic personality. She was a talented musician, honor student, and a cheerleader with tons of friends. Always smiling, she never said anything bad about anybody. She was a sweetheart. Everybody just loved her. She had a great personality. She was prom queen. She was homecoming queen. She was just a gorgeous, gorgeous girl, said Jim Kaufman, a classmate who visited Crowley in Florida just before her slaying. All of her classmates were devastated. Everybody in the whole town was. The whole town, from young to older people, knew her very well. She was very, very outgoing. She was also a thoughtful friend who made great efforts to stay connected, said Sharon McBreen, who moved from Illinois to Florida in 10th grade. Not only did Crowley write long letters, but she mailed McBreen a senior yearbook signed by all her former classmates. Crowley's note in the book was 2 pages long. "She was just one of those really good friends who never missed your birthday. The card was always on time. She would write me 6-page letters," McBreen said. "She would just write front and back. She filled these letters with everything that was going on in town and what she was thinking and what she wanted to do." William Frederick Happ, DC 1727 DOB 1962, 5th Judicial Circuit, Citrus County case, 86671 venue, changed to Lake County on 06/29/88. Sentencing judge, the Honorable Jerry T. Lockett. Attorney trial, Jeffrey M. Pfister. Assistant Public Defender. Attorney Direct Appeal, Christopher S. Quarles, Assistant Public Defender. Attorney Collateral Appeals, Robert Strain and Carol Rodriguez, CRCM. Date of offense 05/24/86. Date of sentence 07/31/89. Circumstances of offense. On 05/24/86, a fisherman found the body of a partially clad woman on the bank of the Cross Florida Barge Canal. The woman's shoulders were covered by a t-shirt that was pulled up to her underarms, and a pair of stretch pants was tied tightly around her neck. The medical examiner testified that the woman's face and skull were badly bruised and hemorrhaged, had multiple scrapes on her back, and right heel had suffered 10 to 20 hard blows to the head and had been anally raped before death, the cause of which was strangulation. The victim was last seen at a Cumberland Farm store at 2:30 a.m. on 05/24/86, and a woman's scream was heard at approximately the same time. The victim's car was found 6/10 of a mile from the store with its driver's side window shattered. A shoe print found outside the driver's side door matched one of Happ's shoes, and Happ's fingerprints were found on the exterior of the car. Happ revealed the details of the crime to a fellow jail inmate, Richard Miller. Happ's first trial ended in a mistrial when the prosecutor violated a court order and revealed Happ's prior criminal record. At the second trial, a friend of Happ's testified that around the time of the murder, he saw Happ walking toward the canal, and the next morning he noticed that Happ had a swollen right hand. Happ's former girlfriend also testified that Happ told her that he had broken a car window with his fist. Trial summary, 12/02/86, indicted as follows. Count Y, first-degree murder, count 2, burglary with battery, count 3, kidnapping, count 4, sexual battery, 02/05/87, entered a plea of not guilty. 06/29/88. Venue changed from Citrus to Lake County case number 88 to 1037. 07/28/89, jury returned guilty verdicts on all counts of the indictment. 07/31/89, jury recommended a death sentence by a vote of 9-3. 07/31/89, sentenced as follows. Count Y, first-degree murder, death counts 2-4, life imprisonment. Case information. Happ filed a direct appeal with the Florida Supreme Court on 08/30/89, citing the following 9 errors: denying motion to dismiss the indictment on double jeopardy grounds, denying motion to suppress evidence, refusing to answer a jury deliberation question, restricting evidence regarding witness testimony, failing to find that the state did not express non-racial reasons for striking a juror, allowing the reading of Miller's, a fellow jail inmate, testimony at the second trial, commenting on the evidence and limiting defense counsel's closing arguments, refusing to allow the defense to refer to the key state witness as a snitch, and squealer, and denial of a fair trial due to the cumulative effect of errors. The FSC affirmed the conviction and sentence on 23/92. Happ filed a petition for writ of certiorari with the U.S. Supreme Court on 06/08/92 that was granted on 11/02/92. The USSC vacated the sentence and remanded the case to the FSC. On 05/20/93, the Florida Supreme Court again affirmed the death sentence of Happ. Happ filed a petition for writ of certiorari with the U.S. Supreme Court on 08/18/93 that was denied on 10/12/93. Happ filed a 350 motion with the Circuit Court on 1/17/95 that was denied on 05/15/97. Happ filed a 350 motion appeal with the Florida Supreme Court on 06/01/98 that was dismissed without prejudice on 09/13/0 to allow Happ to raise ineffective assistance of counsel claims in an amended 3.850 motion. Happ filed an amended 3.850 motion with the Circuit Court on 11/02/99 that was again amended on 08/31/00 and 11/10/00. The motion was denied on 09/18/03. Happ filed a petition for writ of habeas corpus with the Florida Supreme Court on 10/27/00, citing issues related to ineffective assistance of appellate counsel. The FSC denied the petition on 03/01. Happ filed a 350 motion appeal with the Florida Supreme Court on 10/22/03 that was denied on 12/08/05. For nearly 3 decades, William Frederick Happ lived in denial. He fought his conviction, filed appeals, and insisted on his innocence, while the family of Angela Crowley carried the unbearable weight of loss. Her life, so full of promise, had been stolen in an act of cruelty, and the man responsible refused to acknowledge it. Then on October 15, 2013, strapped to a gurney inside Florida State Prison, Happ finally spoke the truth. In his last moments, he confessed to what everyone already knew, that he had kidnapped, raped, and murdered Angela Crowley in 1986. His words, "It's my agonizing shame that I must confess to this terrible crime," came far too late. For Angela's family, it was a shocking reminder that the justice system can take decades to deliver not only punishment, but also the truth. The confession did not bring Angela back. It did not erase the pain of 27 years without her, but it did strip away the last excuse, the last lie that Happ had hidden behind. For her family, the execution closed one chapter, but the ache of her absence will never truly disappear. William Happ's story is a grim reminder of how long justice can take and how denial can deepen the wounds of grief. In the end, his death was quiet, far more merciful than the brutal way he ended Angela Crowley's life. This was the case of William Frederick Happ, a man who spent decades fighting his sentence only to admit the truth when he had nothing left to lose.